Hi, I'm Jason with the All Things Open team. We're here with Sophia. We're going to talk about responsible AI, nutrition labels that you may not think what they are, and a whole bunch more. Sophia, welcome to the studio. Please introduce yourself to the All Things Open community.
Thanks for having me. My name is Sophia Rowland, and I am a senior product manager at SAS, and I work specifically on our machine learning operations solution. I came into this role specifically for our MLOps solution because I was working as a data scientist with a lot of different organizations in advanced analytics, and a lot of them were having the same problem. They've built their machine learning model and got to the point of where they were asking, well, what now? What's next? How do I actually use this? And that is what really started driving me towards MLOps.
Cool. So you're passionate about responsible AI. What does that mean to you, and why is it so important?
When I think about responsible AI, I think about responsibility for all innovations. I drove here today. I took a car to get from my home here. And it's a great benefit to humanity, having these cars, having the transportation aspect of it. But there's also a lot of risks, and we are all very well aware of those risks. I took driver's ed, I got to learn all about it, and there's also rules and regulations around how we leverage cars in our society, because we all agree that there's risks, but the benefit is worthwhile enough that we are going to allow these rules and regulations. And I think with AI, it's very similar. It has a lot of great potential for humanity, but there's also a lot of risks, and folks just simply aren't aware of those risks. And because they're not aware of those risks, they're not designing their AI systems to mitigate or address those risks. And when I think about responsible AI, I think about our duty to make sure that we are not causing harm to others because of our lack of awareness.
Great. That's so great. Tell me more about nutrition labels in regards to AI.
When we think about a nutrition label, we have information about an item of food that we can use to make a decision about whether or not we want to consume that item. We have the calories, the sugar, protein, ingredients, all really great pieces of information in a consumable form. We've been using model cards to act as nutrition labels for models because we want this information to be easy for someone to understand and consume and make a decision about whether or not that model should be put into a production environment, whether it should be used for decision making. And sometimes because that model is already being used for decision making, we want to make sure it remains healthy over time so that we know when it is time to retrain, refresh, replace, or even retire that model. So model cards have a lot of great information about that process, whether it's generalizability, how well it does on unseen data, its accuracy at the time of training, its accuracy over time, the data that it was used to train on so that we can understand what went into the model, and of course how the model was performing over time and whether there is any drift in the data that's going into the model.
Oh, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. What are some other risks involved in using AI technology, and how do we mitigate those risks?
There are quite a few risks, but a lot of it boils down to what happens when the model gets it wrong, because it will get it wrong. We get it wrong all the time, but whenever it's wrong, there is a cost. There's a business financial cost that we should be aware of. Maybe we're losing money, but depending on the use case, there might be a human or world cost as well. Some of these use cases will be denying an individual a resource whenever the model gets it wrong. And so we need to take that through to the end to understand, well, if we deny this individual this resource, well, what does that lose for them? And so it's not just these financial costs that we need to be aware of. You need to take this in consideration with the discrimination and disparate impact as well, because a lot of our data has been biased in the past, and AI is picking up on those biases and perpetuating it, and it creates an extra layer of governance that we have to do on our models to check for these biases so that we don't perpetuate disparate impact on others. Because if we do, that's not just a financial cost, that's a reputational cost as well.
There's a lot of discussion about AI's role in development. Do you think AI will replace developers?
I don't think so, but I don't think that will stop some people from trying. AI has a lot of great benefits that it can use to help developers, but it really does require a bit of human in the loop. I mean, just think about how often large language models are trained. Think about how often new open source frameworks are introduced. A large language model might not catch that there are changes in this open source framework as fast as a human can, because retraining can take quite some time. Also, thinking about debugging and how complicated debugging can be. You have to identify that there is a problem. You have to find potential scenarios that would resolve that problem. And sometimes it is trial and error. And while there are some advancements to help with that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult if you're looking at an enterprise code base where you might have one part where you're calling the function here, but it's actually developed in another file so far away, and your AI just simply doesn't have the context window for that. So while it may be helpful to suggest things for you to try, I think it really does come down to the developer using it more as a productivity tool rather than a replacement.
I agree. I think it's a great assessment. What is machine learning operations, and can you give us a few practical examples?
Machine learning operations is the process for getting a machine learning model in a place and form where it can be used to influence a decision. And because it's influencing a decision, you are able to make that decision better and improve an outcome. So this also includes making sure that model remains healthy over time, because machine learning models are trained at a particular point in time on a particular data set, trying to identify these patterns in the world around us. But our world's always changing. And so when a machine learning model is trained at a specific time point and replicating a specific pattern, that pattern won't hold forever. And this is a process called model decay, because the model's becoming less accurate. And so it's on us to monitor that model over time to make sure it remains effective and is performing well. For example, we've all pulled up a website and gotten an ad. But behind the scenes, there's often a machine learning model selecting that ad based on a whole host of characteristics that we might not necessarily have wanted the ad server to know. But that machine learning model is pulling that information together in a very quick fashion. It's already stood up and running, and it's sending those results back so that it can be used within that website to serve that specific ad. So that process of taking that machine learning model and getting it into a place where it's stood up, where it's running, where it can accept traffic and send the results back out into a wider system is really supported by MLOps.
That is fascinating to me. So cool. I'm glad we have smart people like you working on that stuff. So we were talking about your talk last year at All Things Open, and that evolved into a new project. Can you tell us about that and what's the latest status on it?
Sure. So last year at All Things Open, I had presented a project that we were working on to take recommendations from the NIST AI risk management framework into a workflow. So essentially we were taking these recommendations and mapping them to the analytics lifecycle, to human tasks, manual tasks, but as well also system automated tasks. And we had embedded this workflow into our product and created a companion document alongside it that listed out these tasks in a Word doc. And I had mentioned that I would love to have a more open framework for this, if anyone had any suggestions. Well, lo and behold, a member of our own OSPO was in the audience, and he came up and he said, let's take that to GitHub Pages. We can easily convert that document and enhance it so that it can stand as it's on its own. And I'm happy to say that within the last month, we've released the beta version of this GitHub Pages so that users can take this document, start filling it out, and create a documentation that helps them show that their model is performing fairly and accurately.
That's really cool. And I love the collaborative piece of the story. It just shows how powerful collaboration is. What's a new tool that you've been using lately to boost your productivity?
So I am a product manager, and I must say I absolutely love Mural. I have a whole kind of mind mapping process where I throw everything on a page, and I just love the flexibility of it. It's unorganized. Maybe there's flows between one another, and I just get it all out there. But within the same tool, I can start to organize things so that I can actually put them in a form that I can use to communicate what's going on to others, use it for story mapping, for user journeys, for just taking notes. So for me as a product manager, I just absolutely love Mural for getting my ideas out there.
Perfect. What's one tip, best practice, or piece of advice that you could share with the All Things Open community?
I think so often we are heads down and working in our own little world on integrating what's really cool. But I think sometimes we do need to come up for air and try to see the whole use case, the whole flow from start to end. And by understanding how the data flows in, how our work affects that, and how even our users are going to be using our tooling and what we're building, I think we can really start to find gaps and areas of improvement that might be beyond our initial what we're working on, but can holistically create something that is much more beneficial for others.
Thanks for sharing that. Sophia, thanks for your time today. Thanks for being in the studio. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks.